2018, he said. And we have a lot of power. Well,
this article out of Washington, Democratic lawmakers joined scores of scientists, health providers, environmental officials, and activists Tuesday in denouncing an industry-backed proposal that would limit dramatically the scientific studies, the environment, chemicals, pollutants, and other health risks if underlying research data is not made public because of patent privacy concerns or other issues. Opponents said the move would throw out the kind of public health studies that underlie enforcement of the Clean Air Act and other landmark environmental controls, since the studies drew on confidential health data from thousands of individuals. Democratic Representative Paul Tunko of New York said the proposed rule was a thinly veiled campaign to limit research that supports critical regulatory action. The rule was proposed by then Administrator Scott Pruitt before his resignation earlier this month amid mounting ethics scandals. At the public hearing Tuesday, opponents outnumbered supporters. It enables the public to more meaningfully comment on the sciences behind environmental regulations, said Joseph Stanko, a representative of industry trade groups and companies affected by what he said were increasingly stringent air pollution regulations. Backers have expressed their own worries about how the broadly written rule would apply to confidential trade secrets. Ted Steichen of the American Petroleum Institute said his group supports the initiative to enhance transparency while ensuring privacy. Representative Suzanne Bonamici, Democrat of Oregon, said the EPA proposal was the latest version of years of transparency legislation for EPA that Congress has rejected. She called it an administrative attempt to circumvent the legislative process. New York State officials and representatives of public and private universities, among others, speaking against the proposal. Opponents also included community health practitioners who had taken time off their jobs to speak at the hearing. Researcher Pam Miller, who works with Alaska Native communities affected by toxins, said she traveled from Anchorage to speak at the meeting. Critics said the policy shift is designed to restrict the agency from citing peer-reviewed public health studies that use patient medical records that must be kept confidential under patient privacy laws. Such studies include the Harvard School of Public Health landmark six-city study of 1993, which established links between death rate and dirty air in major U.S. cities. That study was used by EPA to justify tighter air quality rules opposed by industrial polluters. While Pruitt introduced the proposal, the EPA is continuing the steps towards its formal adoption under the new acting administrator, former Pruitt EPA Deputy Andrew Wheeler. In an email, EPA spokesman James Hewitt indicated Tuesday that Wheeler wanted to balance transparency and privacy concerns. Rick?
Obama decries politics of fear. First Black president of U.S. celebrates the first Black president of South Africa from Johannesburg. In his highest profile speech since leaving office, former U.S. President Barack Obama on Tuesday announced the policies of President Donald Trump without mentioning his name, taking aim at the politics of fear, resentment, retrenchment, and decrying leaders who are caught lying and just double down and lie some more. Obama was cheered by thousands in Johannesburg's Wanderers Stadium as he marked the centenary of Nelson Mandela's birth by urging respect for human rights, the free press, and other values he said were under threat. He rallied people to keep alive the ideals that the anti-apartheid activists worked for as the first Black president of South Africa, including democracy, diversity, gender equality, and tolerance. Obama opened by calling today's times strange and uncertain, adding that each day's news cycle is bringing more head-spinning and disturbing headlines. We see much of the world threatening to return to a more dangerous, more brutal way of doing business, he said. A day after Trump met with Russian President Vladimir Putin, Obama criticized strongman politics. The politics of fear, resentment, retrenchment are on the move at a pace unimaginable just a few years ago, Obama added. Those in power seek to undermine every institution that gives democracy meaning, he said. The first African-American president of the United States spoke up for the equality in all forms, adding, "I would have thought we had figured that out by now." But Obama reminded the crowd that we've been through darker times, we've been through lower valleys. He closed with a call to action. I say, if people can learn to hate, they can be taught to love. The crowd gave him a standing ovation. Mandela, who was released from prison in 1990 and became president 4 years later, died in 2013 at the age of 95. Well,
out of Atlanta, allegations of sexual misconduct against Kentucky lawmakers have become so common that the state house has seemed more like a frat house. 7 lawmakers have faced accusations, including 4 who settled secretly with a female legislative aide. Voters' response? Mostly keep them in office. Of the 5 lawmakers up for re-election this year, 3 easily made it through their party primaries and are favored to retain their seats in November. The other 2 chose not to run. It's not just Kentucky. An Associated Press review finds that 25 state lawmakers who have been accused of sexual misconduct are running for re-election or another office this year. Of those, 15 have already advanced to the November 6th general election. 7 did not even face a challenger in the primary. Cassandra Cooper, who filed a sexual harassment claim against the former Kentucky lawmaker in 2013, wonders why voters would re-elect public officials accused of sexual misconduct or simply choose to ignore the allegations. That shocks me, she said. Where is the empathy? Kelly Dittmar, an associate professor of political science at Rutgers University, said the relative political success of accused state lawmakers suggests that voters are unsure how to respond. Does a private feeling disqualify someone from serving a public office? We don't have an answer for that, she said. That is true even in states where voters have a history of supporting female politicians and traditionally liberal issues. In California, of the 6 state lawmakers who faced misconduct allegations and ran for re-election or another office, 4 advanced to the general election. That includes 2 women. Assemblywoman Cristina Garcia, an early advocate for legislative changes in support of the Me Too movement, was the top vote getter in a crowded June primary for her Los Angeles area district. She took a 3-month leave of absence earlier this year after a former legislative staffer accused her of groping him in 2014. Investigators initially cleared Garcia of the charge, but her accuser appealed the findings and the investigation has since been reopened. In November, Garcia will face Republican Mike Semperdefer, a 56-year-old mortgage banker who sits on the board of a national nonprofit dedicated to helping survivors of sexual assault. He was inspired years ago to become an advocate after family members told him of their experiences with sexual assault. Through that tough experience, it opened my eyes to what goes on. Simplewinder said, I have a blunt message. Men, it's time to start standing up. Simulcast said some politicians facing harassment allegations will do what he considers the right thing and resign, but others try to hang on to power. He called the allegations against Garcia embarrassing. Cristina Garcia is not the North Carolina Allison Dahl initially did not plan to bring up the allegations against Representative Dwayne Hall, as she challenged him in the Democratic primary. The 54-year-old office manager from Raleigh eventually decided to send 2 mailers late in the campaign, noting the calls by others for Hall to resign, then won the state's May 8th primary. When he didn't resign, it became clear that I was going to have to highlight the allegations because it didn't seem apparent that people were reading the news or even knew about it, Dahl said. Hall did not respond to an interview request. Dahl and Simplefender are among the few candidates to raise their opponent's sexual misconduct claims on the campaign trail. Many challengers say they try to avoid it, preferring to focus on bread and butter issues such as education, healthcare, and jobs. Rick?
And 2 short national news articles from the World Herald. Russian pilgrims mark 100th anniversary of Tsar's execution from Moscow. Thousands of Russian pilgrims have walked in a procession marking the 100th anniversary of the execution of Tsar Nicholas II and his family. Russia's last Tsar, his wife, and 5 children were executed by Bolshevik soldiers in the city of Yekaterinburg 18 months after Nicholas abdicated in the February 1917 revolution. They'd been moved from detention in St. Petersburg and then in Siberia as the Russian Civil War raged. The procession started out late Monday from the Church on the Blood, which was built on the site of the execution, and ended Tuesday at the site where the bodies were dumped 13 miles away. The procession was led by Patriarch Kirill, head of the Russian Orthodox Church, which has canonized the Tsar and his family as martyrs. Kirill then led a religious service Tuesday where the bodies were dumped. Nicholas ruled Russia from 1894 until his ouster in March 1917. The remains of Nicholas and his family were reburied in St. Petersburg in 1998. Rumors have persisted that Anastasia, one of the Tsar's children, escaped execution. Evidence discovered in recent decades refute those tales. New genetic tests confirming the authenticity of the remains may end the rumors. The confirmation is the first step for the Russian Orthodox Church to formally recognize the remains and rebury them with full religious ceremony and rites. And second, immigrant kids describe chill of detention from Santa Ana, California. Wet and muddy from their trek across the Mexican border, immigrant children say they sat or lay on the cold concrete floor of the immigration holding center where they were taken. It was hard to sleep with lights shining all night. They say they were hungry after being given what they say were frozen sandwiches and other food that was smelly. Held with teens in pens surrounded by metal bars, young children cried and clamored for their parents. Toilets were filthy and running water was scarce, they say. They waited frightened of what the future might bring. I didn't know where my mother was, said Griselda, 16, of Guatemala, who entered the U.S. with her mother in the McAllen, Texas area. I saw girls ask where their mothers were, but the guards would not tell them. The children's descriptions of various holding centers are part of a voluminous and at times scathing report filed in federal court this week in Los Angeles in a case over whether the Trump administration is meeting its obligations under a long-standing settlement governing how young immigrants should be treated in custody. Dozens of volunteer lawyers, interpreters, and other legal workers fanned out across the Southwest in June and July to interview more than 200 immigrant parents and children in holding facilities, detention centers, and a youth shelter. Advocates said the government isn't complying with the decades-old Flores Agreement, which lays out detention conditions and release requirements for immigrant children. Government monitors for the Department of Homeland Security have said the conditions laid out in the settlement are being followed. One monitor, Henry Moak, Jr., juvenile coordinator for the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, documented the air temperature as appropriate at a number of border facilities and said he drank the water himself at a processing center in McAllen. He said some children and parents told him they disliked the food and weren't sure the water was drinkable, but there were no allegations that the food was spoiled. At the Yuma station in Arizona, he said, he tried the water too, and I can confirm the water fountains worked and the water tasted clean. Authorities are now uniting parents and children under a separate court order. Paul?
Okay, it's 10:21. We're going to switch over to the local news. Arlen Kempke didn't have a name for the old barn north of Lyons, but he did have a history with it. Excuse me. He was a young man, still in high school, when he earned a few dollars stacking hay bales in it. He remembers the farmer at the time milked cows in that barn, as did the farmer before him and the farmer after. Kempke and his wife, Cindy, moved to the farmhouse in the early 1970s, renting at first, but buying it a few years later. And the barn, though built at the turn of the century, was still straight, still sturdy. You could use it yet, he said, from their home in town, where he and Cindy moved after they sold the farmstead. We stored a little grain in there. We stored a little hay. But then, maybe 20 years ago, the northwest corner gave in and bowed out. It went real slow, but it started leaning and leaning and leaning. By the time he and Cindy moved to Lyons, they'd become used to a steady stream of people stopping along US 77. The professional photographers would venture down their driveway for a closer look. The amateurs would snap pictures from the road. The new owners did have a name for the old barn. When Hillary and Andrew Tuttle bought the property nearly 2 years ago, they started calling it the Leaning Barn of Lyons. It helped direct visitors to their new place. That's what we'd always say. Just turn at the Leaning Barn, Hillary Tuttle said. They too became used to seeing cars stopping on the edge of the highway, drivers getting out, phones pointed at the barn. There were people up there all the time, she said, and whenever we were home, it was common to see people pull into the lane to take pictures. She also got used to logging onto Facebook and seeing photos of her leaning barn on a virtual Facebook photo album, Nebraska Through the Lens, that has 143,000 members. She looked at her own property, captured by the cameras of strangers, more than a dozen times. She would often leave a comment letting people take plenty of pictures before you take it down. And she'd write back, yes, they plan to level it eventually. We just don't have the heart to do it now. Too special. But her family kept a healthy distance. They emptied it with some fencing supplies after they bought it, but then they pretty much stayed away. There was a tree between their house and the barn, and they had a strict rule. You don't go past the tree. Unless we mowed, she said, and then I said a little prayer as I ran under it as quick as I could. The barn kept leaning, and it seemed to get more precarious during last winter and wet spring. I think it loosened up the nails, she said, and softened the wood. As spring turned to summer, they were on death watch, taking pictures daily to chronicle its demise. Kempke, who still kept tabs on his whole place, quietly predicted the barn would go down on the 4th of July. He was a week off. On June 28th, Tuttle was outside doing chores when she noticed the barn looking more weak-kneed than ever. So I went inside to get my phone. When I came back out, it was down. She hadn't heard a sound, even though her patio door was open. She hadn't felt anything either. Outside, it looked like the barn's north side had surrendered first, and then its sides collapsed and the roof fell in. Later, sifting through the wood, they would find a mason jar of 60 years ago receipts for artificial insemination of cows. And And a photographer from Iowa, a regular who had snapped the barn in all seasons, would race down their driveway distraught when she saw what had happened. This lady jumped out and said, "Oh no, my barn finally fell." They let her take a few pieces of wood, and they salvaged some of their own. Tuttle plans to make frames for pictures of the old barn. When she posted the news on Facebook, 2,300 people reacted, most of them with a sad face. And 125 people left written condolences, some saying the collapse actually made them cry. But back to the day the barn finally fell. About 2 hours later, a strong thunderstorm ripped through Burt County. Too late to trouble the barn, Tuttle said. She was like, I'm going to go on my own terms before this storm.
Yes. In the 2019 city budget, priorities are public safety and streets. The city of Omaha's budget would exceed $1 billion for the first time and put more money toward public safety and streets under proposal by Mayor Gene Stothert. Under Stothart's 2019 budget, the city's share of property taxes would remain the same with no change to its tax rate. The restaurant tax also would remain the same rate. Omaha City Council President Ben Gray predicted that the council would make a few changes to the proposal, but I don't consider those changes to be major, he said. Stothert, who's in her second term as Omaha's mayor, unveiled her budget proposal publicly Tuesday. She said it reflects what taxpayers want prioritized and feedback from members of the city council. Number one is always public safety, she said. Number two is coming in very strong at roads. Gray said the city still has a long way to go on streets, but said that nearly $230 million in capital funds that voters approved in May will help fund more projects. We're going to be making some substantial progress, he said. Councilman Brinker Harding said that while anyone would like to see their taxes go down, he thinks that Stothert has put together a budget that makes sense. It's not every year that we're going to be able to deliver a tax decrease, he said. The proposal will now go to the council for consideration. A public hearing is set for 6:30 p.m. on July 31st. Among the plan's highlights, the general fund budget for city operation would grow 3.4% to $400 million. 20 police officers would be added to reach a sworn strength of 900 for when the city opens a fifth policy precinct in Elkhorn police precinct in Elkhorn next July. There would be no change in the city's property tax rate or Omaha's 2.5% restaurant tax. Street resurfacing would get $500,000 more to bring the budget to $12.3 million. And nonprofits seeking city funding would see more city scrutiny and would be subject to limits on what money can be used for more. Well,
okay, this is a cool article. A group of veterans and their families watched intently as a crop Boeing Stearman biplane for a personalized 15 to 20 minute tour of the area. Despite scattered rainstorms throughout the morning, hopes for airborne rides rose as the biplane was pushed into the tarmac and skies cleared Tuesday. Let's get this baby cranked up, one of the veterans said after assistant at Fairview Manor, the assisted living facility where they lived, photographed them in front of the aircraft. Ultimately, crosswinds were too high for the plane to fly, but the Ageless Aviation Dreams Foundation plans to return in the fall to deliver on its promise of giving veterans a ride in a 100-mile-per-hour convertible that flies, said pilot Tim Newton. Ageless aviation pilots, 5 total, fly across the country to deliver airborne joy rides to veterans at no cost, Newton said. The organization has 3 Boeing Stearman biplanes and gives 800 rides per year. The plane, which is used, not sure if it's used anymore, to train military members, can do loops and rolls, but for veterans, it provides a gentle sightseeing tour with seat turns, he said. In these rides, the plane goes up to the next page here, 110 miles per hour and up to 1,500 feet in the air. It's a height that gives them a different perspective, Newton said. I like flying the veterans by places they know so they can see them from a different angle. This is the second time Ageless Aviation has visited Fairview Manor, said Chris Eckler, who coordinates social services at the facility. Lawrence Newt, who had flown during the group's visit 3 years ago, was prepared for a chilly ride and had a flannel shirt handy. It's misty and cold up there, he said, but beautiful. The flight provides views of checkerboard-like cornfields with irrigation pivot. This time, he invited his daughter-in-law, Valerie Newt, and her sons, Chad and Zaden, to watch him up in the cockpit. He was very excited. Valerie said of his last flight, it was something new. The event is a way to express appreciation for veterans, she said. Lawrence Newt served 30 months in France from 1957 to 1960, where the Army as a heavy equipment engineer. After taking group photos, Newton started the plane from the back cockpit. His hair blew back, ruffled by the wind as smoke billowed out from the bottom of a growling engine, propeller whirling. The engine grew to a roar as he taxied the plane to get gas. Even though the Boeing Stearman didn't leave the ground, the gathering was a celebration of the veterans' service, said activities coordinator Sarah Sherman. Fairview is one of 5 veteran homes in Nebraska and provides services for 12 veterans with 55 residents total, Eckler said. Rick?
Near Elk Creek, Nebraska, niobium mine receives a boost from feds. Calls from interested investors are pouring into the company seeking to open a niobium mine in southeast Nebraska, and the increased activity is thanks in part to Trump administration moves highlighting the national importance of critical minerals. NioCorp Developments Limited has been working for years on the project that would pull niobium, scandium, and titanium from the ground near Elk Creek. Hope this thing tells us what these are. The administration has identified all 3 of those elements as critical to the U.S. economic and national security. That has increased investor interest as the company seeks to raise $1 billion in capital, according to Jim Sims, NioCorp's Vice President for External Affairs. There's no question that this process has helped our project by raising its visibility both in the States and internationally, Sims told the World Herald. Sims was on Capitol Hill on Tuesday testifying in the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee hearing about the country's increasing reliance on importing such critical minerals from other countries. Last year, for example, the United States imported 100% of its supply of 21 such minerals, compared with 100% of just 11 minerals in 1997. President Donald Trump has signed an executive order calling for federal agencies to address the situation. Toward that end, the Interior Department recently released a list of 35 critical minerals used in everything from rechargeable batteries to LCD screens. A report is due later this year on additional steps to reduce reliance on imports of those minerals. Tuesday's hearing included debate from the role of environmental regulations in holding up domestic mining projects. Sims touted his own company's upfront efforts to reduce or eliminate environmental impacts. Efforts, he said, have significantly limited the need to jump through federal hoops. That's why changes in federal permitting aren't necessary for the viability in the Nebraska project, Sims said. And yet the ongoing discussion among policymakers has served to increase awareness of what they're doing. During the hearing, Sims ran lawmakers through the project and the minerals it's targeted. Niobium is used to make steel stronger. Scandium does the same thing for aluminum, which allows for lighter and more fuel-efficient vehicles and aircraft. Titanium has a variety of applications, including the defense industry. Sims asked rhetorically how much niobium is produced in the United States. 0, he said, for 100% reliant on foreign nations for niobium. The Elk Creek project will turn that around. We're going to put the U.S. in a position of being a producer of niobium for the first time in U.S. history. He talked about Nebraska and the United States emerging as a scandium superpower, given that only 15 metric tons are produced globally now, but the new mine is expected to produce 100 metric tons per year. In an interview, Sims talked up the economic boom that the project would be to the region. He said he couldn't give specifics about how close the project is to that required billion-dollar threshold. It just takes time, Sims said. These are investors that are looking to put in anywhere from $1 million to tens of millions to hundreds of millions. The due diligence process that they do before they make that investment is very substantial, and it should be. Paul.
This article out of Gearing, the first human case of West Nile virus in Nebraska this season has been reported in a western county, according to health officials. The Scottsbluff County man who contracted the infectious disease is between age 50 and 70 and spends time outdoors, said Paulette Schnell, director of the county's health department. He wasn't hospitalized. West Nile virus is spread through infected mosquito bites. The county, which has irrigation canals in the North Platte River, has seen an increase in mosquitoes. Snell said moisture in the area has produced conditions where the disease can flourish, including standing water. State epidemiologist Dr. Tom Safranek said there will likely be more virus cases this year. Mosquitoes in Lancaster and Phelps counties have tested positive for the virus so far. Nebraska recorded 68 human cases of the virus and 2 deaths last year. Most people who test positive for the disease will either have no symptoms or mild flu-like symptoms. Some may experience headaches, body aches, vomiting, fatigue, or weakness. The disease came to local health officials. Health officials recommend residents apply mosquito repellent, drain standing water, avoid spending time outdoors during dawn and dusk, and wear long sleeve shirts, pants, and socks when outside. Rick?
From expressway to jumbo dumpster, weenie roast leftovers went to waste. If you burn a few hot dogs on the grill, getting rid of them is a cinch, but it's a big job when there's a truckload of charred frankfurters like the mess crews dealt with over the weekend. A semi-trailer truck hauling hot dogs caught fire Saturday morning on the West Dodge Expressway. No one was injured. The Omaha Fire Department says the blaze was accidental, but it did not have a specific cause. Here's some more info on the roasted weenies. Battling the blaze, Omaha firefighters used 5,000 gallons of water to douse the fire in the truck's trailer, which was fully engulfed. That's a significant amount of water. Putting out a room fire in a house, for example, typically would require less than 1,000 gallons. The boxes the Franks were in and the wooden pallets the boxes were sat on provided plenty of combustible material. Crews had to cut into the side of the semi's trailer to get at the flames. Dogs in a dumpster. Arrow Towing was called to help clean up the mess and haul away the damaged trailer. Photos of the scene showed burned and smashed hot dogs on the road. An Arrow crew hauled all of the hot dogs and put them temporarily in a dumpster on the property of the excavating business near 66th and Grover Streets in Omaha. It's a jumbo-sized dumpster measuring 7 feet tall, 8 feet wide, and 22 feet long. The Franks will be taken soon to the Douglas County landfill. Concrete repairs. The semi's trailer caught fire in the eastbound elevated West Dodge Expressway near 114th Street. The blaze damaged a concrete bridge rail. The Nebraska Department of Transportation is doing further inspection to make sure there isn't any additional damage. The state would bill the trucking company's insurer for the cost of repairs. And Paul, I don't know whether there are a whole bunch of dogs following the truck, but it doesn't say whether they did or not.
Well, maybe it was upwind, downwind, somewhere where the dogs just didn't know what was going on. Well, it's 10:41, and we'll switch over to the obituaries. I will be reading from Mazer and Love Funeral Home on A Street. Cooley, Lou Cooley Jr., age 94. Celebration of Lou's life will be held at 1 p.m. Thursday, July 19th at Roper & Sons Funeral Chapel on O Street. Memorials may be given to Christ United Nebraska City. Marshall Funeral Chapel of Nebraska City is in charge of the arrangements, and no other information is available at this time. William Eli, age 88. Services will be at 10 a.m. on Friday, July 20th, all at the Lincoln Memorial Funeral Home. John Goebel of Lincoln, age 87. Service will be Thursday, July 19th at 9:30 a.m. at the Cathedral of the Risen Christ Catholic Church on Sheridan Boulevard. Memorials can be directed to the People's City Mission or St. Michael's School Scholarship Fund. Buthurst Mazer and Love Funeral Home is handling the arrangements. Ingrid Hansen, age 84. A service honoring Ingrid will be at 11 a.m. Friday, July 20th at Buthurst Mazer and Love. Her family requests memorials to the People's City Mission, the Lighthouse, or the Danish Immigration Museum in Elkhorn, Iowa. Gail Herlin, age 74, of Madera, California, formerly of Lincoln. A memorial service will be held at 2:30 p.m. Monday, July 23rd, at the College View Academy on Culvert Street. Higbee Mortuary is handling the arrangements. Carla Johnson, age 63, of Lincoln. Services will be held Thursday, July 19th at 10 a.m. at the Salem Lutheran Church in Stromberg. Memorials are suggested to the family to be designated later. Dubas Funeral Home is in charge of the arrangements. Mary Johnson, age 73. Services will be held at 11 a.m. on Friday, July 20th at St. Mark's United Methodist Church on Pioneer Boulevard. Memorials may be given to the Backpack Program or the Friendship Home. Lincoln Funeral Home is handling his arrangements. Lovelace, Rondi Lovelace, age 54, of Lincoln. A celebration of life will be held on Sunday, July 22nd at Hope Community Church on South Folsom Street. Mary Newell, Neul, age 56. There is a graveside service going on right now, if it has not been completed, at the Lincoln Memorial Cemetery. Nancy Olison, age 70. No other information available other than Aspen Aftercare is handling the arrangements. Parker, Malvina Parker, age 94, and Brandon Ritzlaff, age 30. For both of them, no other information is available. Irma Ripa, R-I-P-A, age 92. Services are Thursday, July 19th at 10:30 at the First Evangelical Lutheran Church in Wilbur. Memorials may be given to the church or to the Wilbur Legion Auxiliary. Kunkel Funeral Home in Wilbur is handling the arrangements. Michael Rustemeyer Jr., age 81. Services will be at 10 a.m. Thursday at Lakeview United Methodist Church on Capitol Beach Boulevard. Trump Funeral Services is handling the arrangements. Patricia Ryan, age 74, of Geneva, formerly of Lincoln. A private family service per Pat's request. Memorials may be directed to the family for later designation. Arrangements are through the Aspen Aftercare Program. Marjorie Sampson, age 83, of Lincoln. A memorial service will be held today at 6:30 p.m. at Buthurst Mazer and Love Funeral Home on East Street. Memorials are suggested to Meals on Wheels. Sickinger, Jennifer Sickinger, age 46 of Lincoln. Memorial service will be at 11 a.m. Thursday, July 19th at Southwood Lutheran Church on Wilderness Hills Boulevard. Memorials to Morning Hope. Roper and Sons is handling the arrangements. Walsh, Daniel Walsh, age 67 of Lincoln. Memorials to family for ALS, Nebraska. Private graveside service. Aspen Aftercare is handling the arrangements. Wendelin, Vera Wendelin, age 83. The celebration of Vera's life will be held at 11 a.m. Friday, July 20th at Roper and Sons South Lincoln Chapel. Memorials to the Alzheimer's Association, Tabitha Foundation, and St. Paul United Methodist Church. And finally, Wire, Elizabeth Wire, W-Y-A-R, age 66. No other information is available at this time. Rick?
From the Omaha World Herald. Brown, Patricia K. Brown, age 58. Celebration of Pat's life will be held Saturday, July 21st. It's at 9 a.m. at the Fort Street Church of Christ on Fort Street. Interment in the Graceland Park. Bremen Mortuary is handling the services. Cliff, Donald George Cliff, who was Tech Sergeant in the U.S. Air Force. He was aged 87. Memorial service will be held at 10:30 a.m. Friday, July 20th at Bellevue Memorial Chapel, interment in the Bellevue Cemetery. Militaries by Offutt Air Force Base Honor Guard. Memorials are suggested to the Nebraska Center for the Education of Children who are Blind or Visually Impaired, or www.afb.org. Bellevue Memorial Chapel is handling the services. Devney, Ralph L. Devney, age 79 of Herman, Nebraska. Memorial services will be held at 10 a.m. Thursday, July 19th at County Bible Church in Blair. No visitation. There'll be a private interment. Memorial suggested to the Devney family. Severs Sprick Funeral Home of Fort Calhoun, Nebraska is handling the services. Ekper, Anna Stafford Ekper, age 70. Memorial services will be held Saturday, July 21st at 10 a.m. at Good News Church on Hickory Street in Omaha. Westlawn Hillcrest is handling the services. Giblin, Teresa Marie Terry Giblin, age 60. A mass of Christian burial at 10 a.m. Interment at the Calvary Cemetery. Memorials to the Nebraska Humane Society. The family would like to thank the compassionate and professional caregivers at Bryan West Medical Center in Lincoln. Fifi Hoffman Dwight Cutler is handling the services. Grant, Ulysses F. Grant, Command Major Sergeant of the U.S. Air Force, retired, age 78. Visitation will be held from 5 to 7 p.m. Thursday, July 19th at Bellevue Memorial Chapel. Funeral services will be held at 1:30 p.m. Friday, July 20th at Bellevue Memorial Chapel, interment in the Bellevue Cemetery. Military honors by Offutt Air Force Base Honor Guard. Memorials suggested to the charity of your choice. Harpster, Ruth J. Harpster, age 85. Visitation will be from 6 to 8 p.m. Wednesday at the Roder Mortuary, 108th Street Chapel. Funeral services 11 a.m. Thursday, also at the Roder Mortuary Chapel. Interment in Hillcrest Memorial Park. Memorials to the Boy Scouts Troop Number 31 or Community of Christ Church. Hupka, Arlene N. Hupka, age 90. A wake service will be held Thursday, July 19th, 7 p.m. at West Center Chapel of Fifi Hoffman Dwight Cutler. The family will receive friends from 5 to 7 p.m. Massive Christian burial will be Friday, July 20th, 10:30 a.m. at St. Stephen the Martyr Catholic Church. Lafferty, Alice V. Dookie Lafferty, age 74. Visitation with family members and a greeting friends from 5 to 7 p.m. with a wake service rosary beginning at 7 p.m. on Thursday at the Roder Mortuary in Omaha. Burial will be at a later date. And There will be services for 4 members of the McKean family. Jean, who died in 2017, Roger, who died in 2014, Judy, who also died in 2014, and Stanley, who died in 2011. Graveside services will be held Friday, July 20th at 10 a.m. at the Omaha National Cemetery. Bremen Mortuary is handling the services and can be contacted for further information. Morin, Moselle E. Morin, age 96. Memorial services will be held Saturday, August 4th at 11 a.m. at First Presbyterian Church. Complete notice will be issued later. Heathy Hoffman, Dwight Cutler is handling the services. Ramsey, Patricia A. Cleary Ramsey, age 86. Services will be held today at 10:30 a.m. They're ongoing at St. Margaret Mary Catholic Church. Memorials to the St. Margaret Mary Parish, Catholic Charities, or your favorite charity. John A. Gentleman Mortuaries and Crematories handling the services. Ripperton, James Gideon Ripperton, age 37. Celebration of his life, Sunday, July 22nd from 10 to 1 a.m. at Bremen Mortuary, Southwest Chapel. In lieu of flowers, memorials can be directed to the family. To leave a condolence, visit www.bremenmortuary.com. Robine, Robert H. Robine, age 57. Memorial Mass will be held Friday, 10 a.m. at St. Robert Bellarmine Catholic Church. Interment at the Resurrection Cemetery. Visitation Thursday, 6 to 7 p.m. with a wake service at 7 p.m. at the John A. Gentleman Pacific Street Chapel. In lieu of flowers, memorials to the family to be designated at a later date. Taylor, Jacqueline Ann Petachik Taylor, age 50. Funeral service will be held 1 p.m. Saturday, July 21st at the St. Michael and All Angels Episcopal Church in Prairie Village, Kansas, with a celebration of life reception to follow. In lieu of flowers, memorials may be made to the American Cancer Society for Jacqueline Ann Taylor's name. Wadham, Marcel F. Wadham, age 94. The family will receive friends on Thursday, July 19th from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. at the West Center Chapel of Heathy Hoffman, Dwight Cutler. Service is Friday, July 20th at 11 a.m. at the West Center Chapel, interment in the Evergreen Memorial Park. Memorials to the American Cancer Society. Walker, Sanja M. Walker, age 78. No local services will be held. Visitation Thursday, noon to 1 p.m. at the St. Agnes Catholic Church in Arnold, Nebraska. Mass of Christian burial will be held Thursday, 1 p.m. at St. Agnes Catholic Church. Interment in the Arnold Cemetery. Memorials to the American Cancer Society. Reichmuth Funeral Home in Omaha is handling the services. White, Kiana White, age 37. Funeral will be held Thursday, July 19th at 10 a.m. at the Antioch Church of God in Christ in Omaha. Weebelhaus, Paul Weebelhaus, age 26. Memorial visitation will be held 5 to 7 p.m. Friday, July 20th, with a prayer service at 7 p.m. at Elkhorn Hills. Elkhorn Hills United Methodist Church on Veterans Drive in Elkhorn. Arbor Cremation Society is handling the services. Asper, Myrtle L. Asper, maiden name Mitdahl, age 90. Celebration of Life service will be held Saturday, July 28th at 2 p.m. at Christ is Lord Church in Irvington, on Irvington Road in Omaha. Memorials to the Alliance of Renewal Churches in Vadnais Heights, Minnesota. And finally, Milton Alexander Mills III, age 97. He was a veteran. Memorial services will be held Friday, July 20th at 2 p.m. in the United Methodist Church in Osceola. Interment in the Osceola Cemetery with military rites by the Osceola Legion Post number 91. Memorials are suggested to the Polk County Foundation with designation for the Osceola Library, Osceola Methodist Church, or the Good Samaritan Society of Osceola. Dubois Funeral Home of Osceola and Stromsburg is handling the services. Listeners' memorials to the Radio Talking Book Network are tax deductible and go a long way to keeping Radio Talking Book on the air. Please keep Radio Talking Book in mind when memorials are listed as donor's choice or your favorite charity. Donations should be sent to Radio Talking Book Network, 7101 Newport Avenue, Suite 205, Omaha, Nebraska, 68152. Thank you for being a Radio Talking Book listener and supporter.
Thank you very much, Rick Miner. It is just a couple of minutes before 11 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and take our mid-show break just a tad bit early. I will save the station ID until after 11 o'clock so we can make sure and get it in the second hour of the podcast. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right over to the menus now. And here comes...
Oh, sure. Let's start talking about food.
Yeah, already.
Happy Hump Day. Today's Wednesday, July 18th. The Meals on Wheels menu for today is Fiesta chicken breast with pepper jack cheese sauce, Mexican rice, Capri vegetables, dinner roll with margarine, fruit cocktail, and 1% milk.
And once again, I'm left to ponder something because of the menus. What are Capri vegetables? Betty, if you're listening, you can come in and tell me what Capri vegetables are. Betty's a former chef, so I'm sure she'll know. And just a reminder, you can hear the senior lunch menus every day, Monday through Friday, right here on Radio Talking Book. In this case,
You have to wear capris.
I guess.
Let's do a PSA now. And here comes, I forget, is it Jane or Becca? We'll find out together on Radio Talking Book.
Join us for third Saturday night audio described classics at Outlook, Nebraska. On Saturday, July 21st at 7 p.m., we will be offering Monty
Fifth 3
Python and
minutes
the
early.
Holy Grail with
Shook
live
him up.
audio description. Join us
Oh,
for
when I went out and
side-slitting
mentioned to him
laughter
that
as
we were
we
probably gonna
walk through
finish
this
early,
classic
so-
comedy adventure. When mythical king of the Britons, King
I'll tell you, I'm
Arthur,
amazed
leads
at how
his knights
how
on
he
the
tells
quest for
with
the Holy Grail, they face a wide array of horrors, including a persistent Black Knight, a cadre of shrubbery-challenged knights, the perilous Castle Anthrax,
Oh, the
the
pyramid.
rabbit with long, pointy teeth,
Well, my 4-year-old can
House of
start
Virgins,
getting into
and a
some,
handful
you know,
of rude
the
Frenchmen.
wicked
Well,
village
I'm
in the
French. Why do you think I
deep
did
dark
that with his
forest.
accent? No registration is required, but there are only 24 headsets available, so first come, first serve. Sighted companions and family members are welcome to attend. Doors will open at 6:30 p.m. and you can set your Mobi pickup for 10 p.m. For more information, please contact Lisa or Rachna at 402-614-3331. Join us on July 21st, or I will taunt you a second time.
The reading of the Omaha World Herald and Lincoln Journal Star are brought to you today by WellCare Health Plans, proudly focused exclusively on providing government-sponsored managed care services through Medicaid and Medicare prescription drug plans to families, children, and seniors in Nebraska. For more about WellCare, call today at 1-888-255-2605 or visit www.wellcare.com/Nebraska.
Thank you very much, Michael. You are tuned to the Radio Talking Book Network in Omaha, Nebraska. We've been proudly serving our blind and visually impaired listeners for over 43 years. Radio Talking Book is brought to you with the cooperation of KIOS-FM in Omaha and statewide through the facilities of NET Radio and Television. I want to thank all of you for being loyal Radio Talking Book listeners and supporters. All right, my friends, it is time to switch back to Studio A now for the second hour of a live reading of the Lincoln Journal Star and the Omaha World Herald. Once again, coming back to the microphones, here comes Rick Miner and Paul Murphy. Go ahead, gentlemen.
Well, thank you very much. It's a 11:01, and we're going to start out with the editorial page. I will be reading from the Lincoln Journal Star. This editorial is written by John Skreta. In a recent column, Senator Lou Ann Linden, and the article was entitled K-12 Spending Outpaces Nearby States, July 5th, portrayed school administrators, Nebraska Teachers Association, and other nonprofits as special interest groups who recycle inaccuracies related to school spending. To enhance student outcomes, we must put aside partisan rhetoric and focus on facts to help promote a solution to the school funding quagmire. While the state has a significant revenue commitment to help fund our public schools, Open Sky noted that Nebraska is ranked a dismal 49th nationally in the percentage of total educational funding shouldered by the state. Spending in our schools has actually grown at a slower rate than overall state spending, according to the Nebraska Legislative Fiscal Office. Based on the current school funding formula, 75% of Nebraska's K-12 districts receive no equalization aid from the state and are almost entirely reliant on local property taxes to fund their school systems. This has heightened concerns among local property owners about school spending since the burden is felt most acutely at the local level. Norris School District, for instance, has experienced a reduction of more than $2 million in state aid between 2009 and 2018, going from $6.5 million to $4.2 million, despite growing more than 300 students during that time. Instead of debate, it is time for Nebraska to embrace imaginative and proactive solutions to benefit our students. We must summon the strength to spend what it takes and the resolve to hold everyone accountable for the result. Solutions are already operational in many Nebraska districts, and we simply need to procure funding to scale them up across the state to benefit all students. High Point quality early childhood programming will increase kindergarten readiness and help set the course for improved outcomes. Next bullet point, increase special education reimbursements from the federal level, currently less than 50%, will help local districts sustain quality classroom supports, i.e. one-to-one paraprofessionals. Next bullet point, quality reading instruction focusing on rapid and highly effective remediation strategies for students in early grades must be implemented. This will help ensure that all students learn to read so they can read to learn in their future. Next bullet point, top flight career academies will offer student career concentration experiences in high skill, high wage positions in high demand in Nebraska. High school students from Norris and other Southeast Nebraska career academy schools, for example, have an advantage in nursing school by graduating from high school as a certified nurse assistant and with a background in both medical terminology and anatomy. Next bullet point, college and dual credit options for high school students taken in their regular school settings can help families defray the cost of post-secondary programs while still in high school. Schools need the assistance of Perkins Career and Technical Education funding to further this aim and ensure the Commission on Higher Learning cooperates with high schools to validate teacher credentials for these courses. None of the previous initiatives are inexpensive, but to borrow a bit of bumper sticker slogan, if you think education is expensive, you should try ignorance. Competing in a global economy and kindling the entrepreneurial spirit are things we must do. Nebraska schools are accountable through Nebraska's accountability for a quality education system today and tomorrow, ratings, and the evidence-based analysis. When it comes to school funding priorities, there are several revenue streams that merit full consideration. Senator Tom Breezy's bill last term, LB 1084, which included rolling back a number of questionable tax perks to help the state fund education and provide Nebraskans with needed property tax relief, needs to be revisited. Senator Lindham's commitment to K-12 is evident by those of us who have worked with her and observed her passion to combat dyslexia and promote advocacy's reading instruction in all Nebraska schools. However, the path to maximizing the potential of our school's student population, including 45% of K through 12 kids in poverty and increasing diversity, is not going to be one of scarcity. We need to provide plentiful support to students. Rather than spending less, we should increase resources on the right things. It's time for Nebraskans to step up our investment in our most critical assets, our children. They are the future of our state and our best chance to diversify and strengthen our economy, build our tax base, and maintain and improve quality of life in this state. John Skrita, who wrote this, is a superintendent of the Norris School District and president of the Nebraska Association of School Administrators. Rick?
From the opinion writers of the Omaha World Herald, a weak president's failures, the debacle in Helsinki. President Donald Trump prides himself on his strength, but at his summit in Helsinki, Finland, with Russian President Vladimir Putin, he showed astounding weakness that is an embarrassment to our country and the hindrance to our national security. Instead of publicly defending our national interests, he kowtowed to Putin's false, self-serving assertions. He tried to make amends Tuesday, saying he supports the conclusion by the U.S. intelligence community, whose director Dan Coates he appointed, that Russia is actively seeking to interfere in our political process. That backtracking, however, can't erase the damage he did on Monday with his string of troubling statements. Instead of standing up for our country as a defender of freedom and liberty, Trump described the United States and Russia as morally equivalent. I hold both countries responsible. I think that the United States has been foolish. I think we've all been foolish, and I think we're all to blame. Such statements were in line with his reaction last year when he took issue with the interviewer who called Putin a killer. We've got a lot of killers, Trump responded. What do you think? Our country's so innocent? According to the Committee to Protect Journalists, 42 journalists have been murdered in Russia since 2000. Many of the victims were investigating government corruption or Russian military interference in the Ukraine. Instead of standing up for the rule of law, a central principle of our society, Trump cast stones at the Mueller investigation into Russia's ongoing attempts to manipulate opinion in our country. Instead of rejecting Putin's absurd offer to have Russian investigators help out with to have Russian investigators help out with the investigation of Russian cyber meddling, termed Trump an incredible offer. The president's attitude gives ammunition to his critics who say he sounds like a useful idiot. The term attributed to Soviet leader Vladimir Lenin to describe easily deceived to describe Westerners who naively aided the Bolshevik cause. Instead of looking to our country's interests, Trump made his egoism the center of his public remarks, prattling on about computer servers and a witch hunt instead of the Russian security threat. It was good to see the clear-eyed statement Coates issued afterward. We have been clear in our assessments of Russian meddling in the 2016 election and their ongoing pervasive efforts to undermine our democracy, and we will continue to provide unvarnished and objective intelligence. Trump's troubling Helsinki performance came amid the wreckage of his trip to Europe, where he continued to sow discord with our longtime allies. How ironic that our president goes so far out of his way to make nice with Russia's thuggish leader, while labeling Canada, of all places, a supposed national security threat, merely as an excuse to impose steel tariffs. Clear-eyed officials such as Defense Secretary James Mattis and UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, plus serious-minded members of Congress, need to continue advocating for responsible foreign policy. Trump often complains that other countries are trying to take advantage of us. His stubborn refusal Monday to acknowledge the ongoing threat from Russia underscores his disturbing weakness of judgment and character as our central foreign policy leader. Paul?
Turning to the letters to the editor of the Lincoln Journal Star, we have this one. As Franklin Delano Roosevelt said in his famous 1932 inaugural address, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. I wonder what he would think if he were alive today. According to those in power in Washington, we should fear immigrants, especially from Latin America and certain Middle Eastern countries. We should fear and shun LGBTQ people. We should withdraw from NATO and the United Nations, NAFTA, TPP, and apparently every other alliance we have ever been a part of. We have already withdrawn from the Paris Accords on climate change and the Iran nuclear agreement. And of course, we must have a multi-billion-dollar wall to protect us from the evil immigrants invading us. The fear I have is of the United States withdrawing from the world stage and becoming more and more isolationist. Globalization is a fact of life. We cannot create an American-only mindset, try to hide behind a wall, and hope to survive as a democracy and a power in the world. That was written by Earl Flitner of Waverly. Rick?
If Brexit deadlock can't be broken, vote again. This editorial appears on the Bloomberg opinion. British Prime Minister Theresa May's new Brexit strategy is collapsing even before the European Union responds. Her plan offered an awkward compromise between a clean break from Europe, which would cause enormous economic disruption, and remaining in the EU, which voters rejected 2 years ago. Apparently, it's an offer nobody wants to accept. May's Conservative Party is bitterly divided between Leavers and Remainers. The Labour opposition is split too. Many on both sides, though, are calling May's soft Brexit the worst possible outcome. Remainers say it's an unworkable fudge. A clean break would be better than the Leavers call it, Brexit in name only. Staying in the EU would at least be honest. Europe might soon reject May's approach anyway. This became more likely on Monday when, under pressure from Leavers in her party, May was forced to yield on provisions that will make her plan even less palatable to the EU. If her proposal can't break the deadlock, there's another way to go. The choice between staying or leaving should be put back before the voters. This won't be easy, but it's starting to look possible. The former minister has come out in favor of a second referendum, the first senior Tory to do so. Labour's leadership hasn't ruled it out, such as the disarray in both parties, that no plan, leave, stay, or split the difference, looks capable of commanding a majority in Parliament. In this state of paralysis, with Brexit deadlines looming, the House of Commons could decide to throw the decision back to the country out of sheer inability to do anything else. Granted, if that happened, the result would be uncertain. Recent polls suggest movement in favor to remain. But it's less than decisive. The EU's position on whether Brexit can or should be stopped is also unclear. Europe's leaders might feel they've had enough of Britain, and if they took a hard line during another referendum campaign, it could push support back to leave. Whatever happened, the issue would not be settled. If a second referendum reversed the 2016 vote, a campaign for a third referendum would begin. Yet Britain's past 2 years of self-sabotaging politics have proven one thing. Voters in 2016 were offered a choice they didn't understand. They opted for Brexit without knowing what it would mean. By now, voters have at least learned that, whatever form it takes, it will be complicated and costly. That's not all that's changed since the 2016 vote. Britain's relationship with Europe is fractured, perhaps beyond repair. A second vote won't fix that, but it might avoid the impending chaos of a no-deal Brexit. At the moment, every other option looks worse. Paul?
Continuing on the editorial page of the Lincoln Journal-Star, no matter how you break down the numbers, the tariffs instituted by the White House have been bad business for American farmers and ranchers. Few states have felt this pain more acutely than Nebraska, where 1 in 4 jobs is supported by agriculture. A variety of obstacles, from low commodity prices to the high cost of land, have hurt the state's producers in recent years. But unlike the ebb and flow of market forces, this widespread pressing crisis to the industry has been entirely self-inflicted and for no good reason. This only compounds the problems faced by Nebraska's farm and ranch families. Even before this burgeoning purposeless trade war entered the picture, the U.S. Department of Agriculture forecast that nationwide farm income would fall to $60 billion, half of what it was 5 years ago. Now, the Associated Press reports that forecast is assumed to be very optimistic given the developments that followed. For the United States' 5 largest agricultural export markets in 2017, Canada, Mexico, the European Union, and China, per the USDA, have responded with some form of retaliatory tariffs. All of those include at least some element that targets core farm products, such as corn, pork, and soybeans, with most farmers expected to lose money on those outputs this year. Cash prices for soybeans, a crop for which Nebraska ranked 5th in total exports, with nearly $1.4 billion in 2015, are down more than $2 per bushel since March, reaching the lowest prices in a decade. The National Pork Producers Council, meanwhile, anticipates its industry will see losses of $2 billion, which averages to $18 per hog. All of this instability has led some farmers and ranchers to exit the industry. Other ag producers said potential for major losses, too, has reduced some banks' willingness to loan money to some farm operations. Tariff-free trade is a cornerstone of conservative economic policy. Central to that is a belief in the free market rather than government intervention in picking winners and losers, spurring innovation and competition that yield better prices for consumers. Punitive tariffs, paradoxically, invoked under the national security exemption, with billions of dollars more announced last week, are bad for Nebraska and weaken the economic security of the entire region. As the world's population grows, someone needs to feed, power, and provide goods for our fellow humans. Nebraska farmers are at the forefront of that endeavor. Agriculture stands to lose more than nearly any other industry under this escalating trade war that's taken aim at allies as well as rivals. The president's words on the campaign trail appealed to many farmers and ranchers. Now it's time his actions did the same. Rick?
Yeah, we got to quit smoking cigars in here.
Oh, geez. Yeah, the smoke is building up.
Well, it's time to move on to today's Living and Entertainment from the mamaha.com by Molly Cavanaugh. Old haunts take on new life with your kids in tow. Last week, I told you all about the kids' first camping trip in the Sandhills of Nebraska. Well, our Cornhusker State Fund didn't end when we broke camp and made our way back east on Interstate 80 to Omaha. Every summer for the past 8 years, we have been making summer trips to Nebraska to visit with family and friends. It's also a chance for me to do a little in-person work at the station, Channel 94.1. This summer is no exception. The kids have their annual July traditions, staying at Grammy's house, swimming with their Papa Cavanaugh in the Field Club of Omaha, malts at Petro's, more swimming at their Aunt Kate and Uncle John Cavanaugh's backyard pool, and a pilgrimage to the Henry Dorley Zoo and Aquarium's Desert Dome. However, this time around, we stepped it up a notch. Having kids is the best way to really dive into being a tourist, even in your own hometown. It can also be an amazing way to revisit your own childhood haunts and see them in a fresh light. If you don't have a child, I would highly recommend borrowing one from a friend or relative and getting a list started of all the places you loved to go as a kid, as well as places that the adult in you would love to go if you were a kid again. Then get cracking. Try the slides at the Jean Leahy Mall as a taste of the old, but then run and splash through the new Alaskan Adventure Splash Ground at the zoo as a touch of the new. This year, I found a perfect combination of the past and present, a trip to Platte River State Park. During a recent walk down memory lane, my sister Ann and I were remembering all the good times we had while staying at Platte River State Park, including the cabins climbing the tower, feeding the monster catfish at Owen's Landing, and the crown jewel of every visit, the craft cabin. We wanted to relive a little slice of our own childhood and introduce this flavor of summer fun to our kids. The park is still very much as we remembered it, with a few exceptions to times past. There's now a cool new splash pad that just opened where the swimming pool once was. And the cabins that once had a bunk bed residence resigned to long, hot, sweltering nights now have air conditioning. However, the craft cabin were just as we remembered it, and it still held all the creative magic. Ann and I could have spent the entire afternoon in the contents of our wallets, decorating birdhouses, hammering leather keychains and bracelets, and painting ceramic figurines. A few things that have changed since we were kids and that stood in the way of our crafting the day away are the kids we now have of our own. Declan, Mara, and their cousin Conroy were more interested in getting to the splash pad than finishing another round of art projects. Our summer stay in Nebraska is coming to a close, but thanks to the extensive fun had in the past 3 weeks, I have secured myself a pair of activity-gorged children rendered exhausted for the foreseeable future. This can allow one grateful mama to make plans for the kids-free glamping trip back to Platte River State Park next summer for another round at Craft Cabin. Now, if they would just get a wine bar.
All right, we're going to switch over to Dear Doctor. Could you please reassure my wife about side effects? She won't take some of her prescribed medicine because of the potential side effects include liver damage, blindness, stroke, heart attack, and death. I have tried to explain the legalities of these statements to her. Your wife's worry is understandable. Having prescribed medications for years, I've seen my share of side effects. They occur in nearly every medication I prescribed, and on occasion can be severe. Clearly, many people feel a distrust toward the pharmaceutical industry and its desire to profit, but those same people should acknowledge the science involved in creating medications to temper and eradicate disease. Yes, I still prescribe medications on a daily basis because in most cases, their benefits outweigh the risk. Excuse me. What concerns me is the need for multiple medications, especially for preventable conditions. Compounding that concern is the juxtaposition in advertisements for medications to treat preventable conditions as well as cerebrals, alcohols, and fast foods. It is almost as if one industry feeds on another. The sheer number of medications that are available for nearly every condition and the propensity of patients to want them and doctors to prescribe them increase the likelihood that overall side effects will occur. You're right that most of those side effects warned about in commercials, of which there are so very many, don't normally occur. And your wife is also right to worry that they could. Whatever the reason your wife was prescribed medication, help her to focus on the possible consequences of not taking it. If she has type 2 diabetes and can't control her blood sugar with her diet, then explain the downside of poorly controlled diabetes. An increased risk of kidney disease, severe dysfunction, coronary artery disease, and a whole lot more. If she has uncontrolled high blood pressure, explain that this increases her risk of stroke, heart attacks, kidney failure, and dementia. The consequences of not treating pneumonia, urinary tract infections, depression, and kidney dysfunction can lead to a worsening of those conditions. If your wife has a preventable condition and doesn't want to take drugs, she should concentrate on her physical and emotional well-being. For starters, she needs to take a hard look at the food she is eating, staying away from processed foods and those high in sugar, and limiting those with high amounts of saturated fat. 2, she needs to stay or become physically active. And 3, she needs to stay mentally active. Well-being means an everyday focus on taking care of oneself while living in a society with so many unhealthy choices. If your wife has a condition that isn't irreversible through lifestyle changes, she should understand that medications can help control her symptoms and the progression of disease, and that the side effects of blindness, stroke, liver damage, heart attack, and death are rare with the vast majority of pharmaceuticals. She should also understand that our country has systems in place to protect patients. Regulatory watchdogs and the practice of evidence-based medicine help reduce the risk of harmful medications being administered to the public. At times, severe adverse events have caused medications to be pulled from the market. Rick?
From the Ask Amy column, family estrangement baffles parents. Dear Amy, our adult son James lives on his own and has a successful career. Suddenly, without notice or explanation, James has cut off all communication with his two loving parents, myself and my wife. Just 3 months ago, we were all together enjoying a birthday lunch for me, where James introduced his new girlfriend. James and his brother provided a very thoughtful and generous gift, and I thanked them both sincerely. Inexplicably, since that day, James has not responded to any form of communication. My wife and I are tearing ourselves apart, seeking a reason for this estrangement. At first, I was wondering if he was having professional difficulties or even feeling suicidal, but he maintains a good relationship with his younger brother. It seems the grievance is with us. James refuses to talk about it with his brother or with us. I've offered multiple times to meet up and apologize for any transgression, but James won't. I've offered that adults can't resolve problems in silence, but to no avail. His new girlfriend seems to be the only variable in the family equation that has changed. Is she manipulating him? Our family is small and we love being together a few times a year. James' silent protest has perhaps desperately now destroyed these future family functions. Amy, we want our son back in our lives. What should we do? Shut out. Dear Shut Out, I shared your query with Carl Pillemer, director of the Bromfenner Center for Translational Research at Cornell University. Pillemer is currently studying family estrangement. He responds, in a survey conducted by Cornell, I asked respondents whether they were estranged, that is, they no longer had contact with one of those relatives, father, mother, son, daughter, brother, or sister. Over 1/5, 22% of this nationally representative sample reported having one of these estrangements. Therefore, people experiencing estrangement should know that they are by no means alone. Anecdotally, almost every family I know, including my own, has at least one estranged family member. The reason can be varied and complex. In your case, I agree that your son's new relationship seems to be the main variable. Abusive or controlling partners can isolate people from their loved ones. You and or your wife should call him at work to see if he could meet with you that same day for coffee. Be very cautious about blaming his girlfriend for his actions. This would cause him to dig in further. Do not allow this to destroy your family. Painful as this is, you should carry on as a family. Continue to include and invite James and his girlfriend to all functions. Do your best to connect without overwhelming him. The harder you push, the easier it is for him to resist. You and your wife should see a therapist for support and ideas. Dear Amy, my husband and I host an Independence Day barbecue every year and invite all of our friends. We provide all of the necessary food, including a vegetarian option. Every year, at least 70% of the guests ask what they can bring. If I tell them not to bring anything, many bring things anyway, and then some of the folks who didn't bring anything feel bad, so they bring things the next year. Some of the guests seem annoyed that I don't give them more direction on what to bring. I'm a little annoyed that it doesn't seem to be impossible to host a party nowadays. It's not a potluck. What are my reasonable options? Host the most. Dear host, the July 4th barbecue is different from a dinner party. People do feel compelled to bring something, anything. You could handle this by giving people a clear and modest direction. 1 bottle of root beer would be most welcome. Alternatively, you could use this party to host a mini food drive for your local pantry. Asking guests to bring canned goods might satisfy multiple needs. Dear Amy, I could not believe your homophobic answer to Mama Bear, who is trying to protect her bisexual son from his homophobic aunt. You should never give advice to anyone disgusted. You're disgusted. My answer was supportive of this teen and his mother. I reminded them that it is not their duty to disclose or discuss his sexuality to someone who is bigoted and hateful toward gay people. Her bigotry is her problem. I felt these two were taking on her problem and in danger of making it their own. Paul?
Okay, it's getting close to the noon hour. We got to start to be the way you're storing your fresh produce. Some produce does better in plastic, others in a basket, and yet others need water. Store your fresh produce with these tips that will save you money and the disappointment of good food gone bad. In water. There's a reason some vegetables and herbs are sprayed with water. It helps preserve their freshness. A good example is cilantro and parsley. Bright and flavorful, these two herbs do best when stems are placed in a jar of water, covered with a plastic bag and stored in the refrigerator, as do most fresh herbs such as sage or thyme. Scallions, delightful, canner out in direct sunlight. Refrigeration will make it go limp. If the water is changed every few days, you can also propagate basil. Once roots are 2 to 3 inches long, it can be transplanted to a sunny location or growing pot. Celery and carrot sticks for snacking should be kept in a container filled with water to preserve their crunchiness. Refrigerated. Without question, some produce must be stored in the refrigerator to preserve freshness. This includes lettuce, carrots, celery, and berries. In addition to refrigeration, there is some produce that needs to breathe. Lettuce and spinach are two of them. Lettuce and spinach that come in plastic tubes should be removed and placed in ventilated produce keeper. These keepers have an inner basket that allows air to circulate to preserve freshness. The plastic tubes they're sold in often accelerate rotting, creating a slimy mess. So keep them stored loosely in a ventilated container. Berries also need circulation, so a ventilated covered basket will help preserve their freshness. At room temperature, not all produce and fruit should be stored in the refrigerator. Bananas, avocados, tomatoes, potatoes, and onions all do well stored outside of the fridge. Tomatoes and bananas should be stored on the counter. Bananas emit a gas that can cause other produce to ripen too quickly, especially apples. So separate them from other produce. Onions and potatoes can be stored in natural basket in a cool, dark pantry, as can garlic. And finally, separated and pre-washed. Separation is also important. Keep fruits and vegetables separate, as some fruits emit ethylene gas that can cause quick ripening. Pre-washing can cause produce to rot, so be sure to wash just before use. A good dunking and spraying of water before use or cooking can remove most dirt and make your vegetables ready for consumption and keep them fresher for longer. Rick?
Oh, I love these things. These cherry pies are fried and tart. There's a picture of them.
Oh, okay. I'll come over to your side.
And they fit in the palm of your hand. Food memories are funny. Well, I remember distinctly the very first time I tasted a fried pie. I find I can't really recall its flavor, texture, or any particulars. More, I remember my brain darn near exploding with the idea that a pie could be fried. And it was that fuzzy recollection that I began figuring out a sweet cherry fried pie, something I dreamed about, imagined, and just had to try to make. In my mind's eye, that hand pie was tangy and had a shatteringly crisp crust. It was showered with powdered sugar and tasted like a carnival funnel cake. The filling was sweet, intense, and stuffed inside so winningly that every bite included fruit. The first 3 or 4 or 6 iterations I produced were terrible. It's a miracle I kept going. In the hot oil dough, I would develop holes, and the pies were oily and unpleasant. Fresh cherries were too saucy and wet. The liquid and then the fruit escaped the confines of the dough pocket and seeped into the oil, spattering and sputtering. At this point, I decided to rely on an expert and reached out to Ronnie Lundy. She wrote the lyrical cultural cookbook, Victuals 2016, and tells the stories of her mountain south and the foods that are central to that region. Among its many recipes I gobbled right up, think sorghum butter, sonkers, pie cobbler mashups, and skillet fried chicken with milk gravy were quintessential fried pies. Lundy set me on a path to success when she explained that the essence of her recipes was in the filling made from dried apples, never fresh apples. I heard her, but I wasn't ready to give up on using the summer's first fresh cherries from my pies. So I cooked sweet cherries, reducing their juices and adding tart, dried Montmorency cherries for a filling that was jammy and chunky and barely sweetened. Once that had been conquered, I set out to make the right dough. I combined shortening plus flour plus liquid to pitching cold bits of fat into the flour. Success came with room temperature shortening that made for an emulsified, smooth dough, loose, sticky, and not one bit like a pie dough. Once chilled for several hours, however, this dough was a joy to work, easy to roll out. It fries up so deliciously you might want to make a double batch right off the bat. Because Lundy's recipe clearly states that lard is an ingredient of some significance in the world of bread pies, I also tested my dough with lard purchased at my local farmer's market. I thought these pies were just a little bit flakier, and because the lard was of such high quality, there was no porky flavor whatsoever. You can't do anything without lard. Making these hand pies requires no advanced skills. Roll out the dough, stamp out rounds with a wide cookie cutter or bowl. I used a scoop to fill the centers, resist the urge to add a little more filling. Use a fork to formally crimp the edges so the filling won't leak out in the skillet. Now let's talk frying. I know there's a serious kitchen condition called fear of frying. That's why I developed this recipe to be shallow fried. With a 10-inch cast iron skillet and in 2 cups of oil, I can fry 3 pies at a time. I use a thermometer to check the temperature of the oil almost obsessively to avoid scorching the pies. Once they're formed, cooking all of the pies in 4 batches takes about 12 minutes, surprisingly easy. I know the people who experience fear of frying also wonder what to do with the frying oil. Here's what. Cool it completely in the pan. Just let it sit out for a couple of hours. Eat the pies in the meantime, of course. Pour the oil through a funnel into a lidded bottle or a jar from a recycling. Cap it tightly and discard it. The bonus, your cast iron pan will be beautifully seasoned. The filling can be made in a few days in advance, and the dough can be frozen then defrosted overnight in the refrigerator, both of which made these pies ready in no time. Crowd-pleasing memory treats. Bring them to your next cookout.
Oh, I thought maybe we'd bring him in today,
Oh, yes.
something like that. Well, it's 11:40. We're going to switch over to the business and the markets out of Washington. Retailers and restaurants increased 0.5% in June, following a big 1.3% gain the previous month. May's figure was revised sharply higher with an initial estimate of 0.8%. Americans are confident about the economic outlook, with the unemployment rate near an 18-year low and the economy accelerating after a sluggish start to the year. Retail sales rose 6.6% from a year earlier, the fastest annual pace in 5 years. Still, some of the spending increases, such as gas station sales, simply reflect higher prices. Excluding auto sales and gas stations, sales rose 0.3% in June. Home and garden stores reported a strong 0.8% sales gain, which was likely lifted in part by more expensive lumber. The Trump administration imposed tariffs on some lumber imports from Canada last fall. With consumer spending strong, most economists believe that growth will jump to a 4% to 4.5% annual rate in the April-June quarter, which would be the strongest in 4 years. That would follow.
Leaders will have more flexibility in deciding whether to buy back the company's own stock because of a policy change approved by the directors of the Omaha-based investment conglomerate. Berkshire said Tuesday that its board authorized Chairman and Chief Executive Warren Buffett Vice Chairman Charlie Munger to repurchase stock at any time if they agree that its price is below the stock's intrinsic value, conservatively termed. That standard replaces the previous policy that allowed buybacks only when Berkshire's stock price was less than 20% higher than its book value. Any such buybacks would not happen until Berkshire reports its second quarter financial results. That is scheduled to happen after the stock market closes on August 3rd, the company said. Book value is an accounting calculation of the value of a company's assets minus its liabilities. Buffett uses intrinsic value as a measure of the company's value as an ongoing business. Determining intrinsic value is a more subjective process. Buffett has said that accounting changes in recent years have made book value a less accurate way to determine Berkshire's true value. Some shareholders have called on Berkshire to use some of its excessive cash, currently more than $100 billion, to buy up shares. If that were to happen, the value of the remaining Berkshire shares would increase, all other things being equal. Buffett has said that he would buy back shares if the price were right, but that stockholders should know when that might happen. He also has said that having a large amount of cash gives him the flexibility to make major acquisitions of businesses for Berkshire. Paul?
All right, it's 11:44. WellCare of Nebraska is proud to bring you today's reading of the Omaha World Herald and Lincoln Journal-Star. For more about WellCare, call today at 1-888-255-2605 or visit www.wellcare.com/Nebraska. Well, we're going to switch over to the sports page. A record 10 home runs, a slew of strikeouts. The all-or-nothing all-star game mirrored what baseball has become. Astro teammates Alex Bergman and George Springer homered on consecutive pitches to begin the 10th inning, and the American League beat the National League 8-6 Tuesday night for his sixth straight win. Mike Trout, Aaron Judge, John Segura also connected for the AL in a game where every run except one scored on a homer. Scooter Gennett hit a tying two-run shot off Seattle closer Edwin Diaz in the bottom of the ninth. Joey Votto, Wilson Contreras, Trevor Story, Christian Yelich also went deep for the NL. There had never been more than 6 homers in an all-star game since Babe Ruth hit the very first one in 1933. Not that everything went the Sluggers' way. Starters Max Scherzer and Chris Sale and the relievers combined to fan 15 in the first 4.5 innings, and there were 24 strikeouts overall. Fitting, because this season is on pace to become the first with more strikeouts than hits the year after a record number of home runs. Orioles shortstop Manny Machado had fun pulling out a camera to snap Major League Baseball, meanwhile seemed to take a selfie of itself at this game with all the homers and strikeouts. This was MLB 2018, an update that's not appealing to everyone. Declining attendance is a concern, and the sports owners worried that slower games with less action on the bases are taking a toll. So I'm not sure about the American game, but I guess we'll have to stay tuned and see what happens.
Well, I see that my beloved Yankees are 4.5 games out of first. So
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about baseball.
And probably you don't want to talk about the Boston
No,
team
absolutely
either,
not.
right?
Absolutely. In college football, Bulldogs want to build off trip to the title game from Atlanta. Even 6 months later, there was no way for Kirby Smart to dodge the question. The Georgia coach just knew he'd be asked if he has recovered from the Bulldogs' loss to Alabama in the national championship game. Everybody wants to ask that question, Smart said Tuesday at the SEC's annual preseason media gathering. It's not like I have nightmares about it. No, Smart added. Georgia enjoyed memorable highlights in Smart's second season, including the Bulldogs' first SEC championship since 2005, a win at Notre Dame, and a national semifinal victory over Oklahoma in the Rose Bowl. The Bulldogs lost their chance for their first national championship since 1980 when Alabama's Tua Tagovailoa completed a dramatic 41-yard touchdown pass to Devonta Smith in overtime. It was a crushing disappointment, but Smart said it shouldn't overshadow the season's other accomplishments. I think we grow from it, Smart said. I think the entire season is a learning experience. It was a confidence builder for a lot of guys on our team. The Bulldogs must replace such 2017 leaders as tailbacks Nick Chubb and Sonny Michael and the linebacker Roquan Smith. Even so, there are expectations for another big season. Senior defensive end Jonathan Ledbetter said it's important for other players to understand that another championship run must be earned. It's a little different, and I will say it's a little dangerous, Ledbetter said. The thought of complacency starts to come in there. We kind of have to push it out if we hear, oh yeah, they're going to win it this year. Added Ledbetter, you've got to take it one game at a time. If you start looking at the future or the past, you've messed up. As the defending SEC champion, Georgia expects to get every opponent's top effort. We know everyone is going to circle us on their schedule, but that doesn't change our mentality, cornerback J.R. Reed said. We know everyone is going to be gunning for us, but we can't change. We have to keep the same mentality. Georgia returns 13 starters, including 8 on offense. Sophomore quarterback Jake Fromm has new competition from freshman Justin Fields, one of the biggest names in Smart's top-rated 2018 signing class. The momentum we created from last season has been tremendous for us through recruiting through spring, Smart said. Fields, skilled as a runner and a passer, will enter preseason practice as the number 2 quarterback, but it's clear Smart has big plans for him. Smart said he has no plans to hold out Fields as a redshirt. He gives us an element in our offense we don't have, Smart said. Usually a team might be expected to struggle to replace a pair of senior tailbacks selected in the NFL draft. Instead, the Bulldogs are still deep at the position, now led by DeAndre Swift. Georgia also should be deep at wide receiver, especially if Demetrius Robinson is granted a waiver for immediate eligibility following his transfer from California. Terry Godwin, McCole Hardman, and Riley Ridley are Fromm's top returning targets. Georgia hopes a balanced offense can take the lead while the defense rebuilds. We know how we did it last year, Reed said. We want to do it even better because we didn't get to finish the result. Paul?
All right. A big weekend in New York led to a big day for Creighton Prep's Cole Arap. The 2019 prospect earned 5 NCAA Division I offers after his strong performance at the Adidas Gauntlet finale. The biggest came from the school just down the road. Nebraska coach Tim Miles offered Arap a scholarship Saturday, one of 3 offers the Huskers head man has extended to in-state players over the last 3 months. Lincoln North Star guard Donovan Williams, a member of the 2020 recruiting class, earned a Nebraska offer the same day as Arap. Bellevue West guard Chucky Hepburn, a 2021 recruit, was offered by NU on May 29th. It just felt really great. I was overwhelmed and blessed, Arap said Tuesday. I think Nebraska is starting to notice that the in-state kids are really good. Arap was really good in New York City, averaging 20 points and 5.3 rebounds for the Omaha Sports Academy 17U team in 3 games. He shot nearly 68% from the field, 60% from three-point range. And he validated his improvement to a Nebraska staff that nearly offered him in the spring before deciding to wait how he developed over the summer. It's been a great process, just having the opportunity to play against the best players in the country and the best teams. It's really something, Arap said. The OSA team, we've been doing really good. We've been putting ourselves on the map. Arap was a critical piece of the Creighton Prep's 26-1 Class A state title team in 2017-18, 2 years after his older brother, Agik, led Omaha South to the Class A championship. So we'll see what happens down the road to Nebraska. Rick?
From the British Open, Woods thinks links present best shot at another major. From Carnoustie, Scotland. Tiger Woods doesn't feel as old as at the oldest championship in golf. Back at the British Open for the first time in 3 years, Woods broke from his tradition on Tuesday morning. Instead of being among the first on the tee for practice, he didn't show up at Carnoustie until his press conference just before lunch. Then he played 9 holes with Masters champion Patrick Reed and Bryson DeChambeau. This was not a case of the 42-year-old needing his rest, entering the year having not played any majors since the end of 2015 and the start of 3 back surgeries. Woods has been feeling better as 2018 has gone on, and there's something about links golf that inspires him. It's my favorite type of golf to play, Woods said. I love playing here, this type of links golf or a style of links golf down on the Aussie Sandbelt because it's creative. We're not going to get the most perfect bounces, and I think that's the fun challenge of it. He made his links debut at Carnoustie in 1995 as an amateur at the Scottish Open, a week before his British Open debut at St. Andrews. He hasn't contended on the net back 9 in the previous Opens at Carnoustie in 1999 and 2007, though he wasn't far from a playoff. Might this be his best shot at winning another major? Not to be smart, but it is the next major I'm playing, Woods said with a laugh. But over time, he thinks it might be his best chance because of history. Woods recalls 53-year-old Greg Norman playing in the final group at Royal Birkdale in 2008, a major Woods missed because of knee surgery. The following year, Woods missed the cut for the first time at the British Open when 59-year-old Tom Watson was 1 putt away from winning at Turnberry. You don't have to be long to play on a links-style golf course, Woods said. You go to places like Augusta National, where it's just a big ballpark, and the golf course outgrows you, unfortunately. That's just the way it goes. But a links-style golf course, you can roll the ball. Distance becomes a moot point. That said, distance is everything at Carnoustie this year, which Woods discovered when he arrived Sunday. How far the ball travels in the air is not the issue, but how far it travels once it gets on the baked turf. Dustin Johnson discovered that when he arrived on Saturday and reached the 499-yard 18th hole, which is stiff breeze at his back and fairways running only slightly slower than they did on the weekend at Shinnecock Hills. He hit a driver into the burn. The next day, his drive was a few yards short of it. I hit some irons, and depending on the wind, I'll probably hit anywhere from hit 3 wood, 3 iron, and 4 iron off the tee, Johnson said. I like all of them. With the wind at his back on the 513th, 14th hole, Johnson hit a 3 iron and wedge. Oh my God. One thing hasn't changed about links golf. It's best to keep the ball out of the pot bunkers, which effectively are a one-shot penalty. Question for so many players is whether that means going down to as little as a 7 iron off the tee, such as on the 350-yard 3rd hole, or smashing driver over all the trouble. Johnson figures he'll hit driver on half of the holes. U.S. Open champion Brooks Koepka might hit as many as 9 drivers. The conditions are as brittle as Muirfield in 2013, though most comparisons are with Hoylake in 2006 when Woods won the Open for the 2nd straight time by hitting driver only 1 time all week. There's not a lot of opportunity to hit the driver just because the ball is going to be rolling 80 yards, Woods said. It's just hard to keep the ball in play. Even hitting sometimes 4 and 5 irons, they've been running 50, 60 yards. It's going to be an interesting test to see which clubs we're going to be using off the tees. And a lot of it is dependent on which way the wind blows. Woods had a 2 iron built for him specifically for the British Open, and he wondered how much he'll even use it. That has been too much club off the tee. Instead, most of his shots are with the 3 iron or 4 iron. Reed was familiar with conditions at the year Woods won at Hoylake, even though he was only 15. Reed won the Junior British Open that summer at Hellsball, not far from Royal Liverpool. I'll never forget hitting that first tee shot and being as young as I was, getting up there, and it was 308, he said. I was just like, wow, I just hit a drive over 300 yards, and now I'm hitting 2 irons over 360 yards. This game has changed a lot since my back took me out of it.
Oh, that's only in my dreams. Husker Extra is running a series called Heat Index, a quick look at the Huskers before fall camp begins August 3rd. This week, Parker Gabriel counts down the 5 best quarterbacks Nebraska is slated to face this fall. Number 4, Dwayne Haskins, sophomore at Ohio State. Career stats, 40 of 57, 565 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception, 86-yard rushing. There's a first-time starter this fall with 171 snaps of collegiate experience ahead of a player like Iowa's Nate Stanley, but the Buckeye sophomore certainly looks like an exciting talent. He showed playmaking ability in 8 appearances as in the passing game and the running game. Haskins is now a clear choice under center for Urban Meyer after Joe Burrow transferred to LSU in May, and the redshirt sophomore will have a wide range of talent around him. To date, Haskins' best on-field exploits came in a victory against Michigan last fall. He entered midway through the third quarter for an injured Barrett and led OSU to 17 points and 216 yards of offense in a comeback win. He also threw for 228 yards and a pair of touchdowns in cleanup duty against UNLV. Well, it's 11:59. It looks like it's our time to move on. So this has been Paul Murphy reading articles from the Lincoln Journal-Star.
And Rick Miner reading from the Omaha World, wishing you a happy week.
Thank you very much, Paul Murphy and Rick Miner for
Well,
us the
have a good
Lincoln
week.
Journal-Star
Yeah.
World Herald today. Tuned to the radio
Should be
talking book.
hopefully
Be here
fairly
next
basic.
week.
Yeah.
We've been proudly serving our blind.
Yeah.